to do so. Okay. We're also it's like it's hardcore fall here, so it's been dark for almost like 2 hours now.
Yeah, because you're much later than I. I mean, it's I think we're getting dark at 7:30 now, so which
Well,
is a
I'm
bummer.
also
I don't like
I'm
it.
also further north. Like you don't. I didn't think about it really until about now, but it's like, oh yeah, I am going to have a lot less light because I'm also up there in the northeast, and
Yeah.
it's
What time does it get dark there? Then 7?
it was pretty dark, pretty much right at 7. And
Wow.
I'm also, the East Coast time zone goes way further west from me, so I'm
Yeah.
also not like yeah, Nevada County is not on the coast, but it's
Yeah.
still you get more sunlight. All
Yeah. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
I've got it. Let me make sure I've got it. Okay, it's embedded on the event. It's working on YouTube. I'm gonna close some tabs here so I could have some battery life functioning. But I'm gonna go ahead and turn Facebook on, share it to a couple of groups, and then, like always, somewhere around 6 o'clock, we'll be good to roll.
Nope.
Uh, let's see. Quit
Well,
thinking
like
about it,
just
Facebook.
practice, it'll probably go pretty quick.
Well, style guide's also one of those. It's if you want anybody else to ever work on a website, it's just so.
Yeah, and you can go crazy. I mean, we'll get into it tonight. I mean, like I worked with Corey once, and it was like 20 pages of document. And a lot of it was like you just plugged in things, but you can go insane with
I
that
mean,
thing. Yeah,
it's
but I'm trying to gear more towards the DIYer, the layman, the less experienced. You know what I mean? Because at this point, somebody who's in development or in design, as an occupation, probably already knows about guides.
yeah. I mean, I think it's a good wrap up to what you've been talking about this whole time because it's okay. You've done all of this work of pretty much crafting the image behind your website.
Yeah.
Here's how to make sure if anyone else ever works on it, like you run into something that's past your skill level,
Yep.
it's going to be consistent, which is just so key.
Yep.
Okay, well, a couple more groups here, and then we'll be about ready to go here. Okay. And there's that funny moment where, like, even though I'm an admin for NC Tech Connection Facebook group, I always forget to add NC Tech Connection to it, so I can't share to the group as as the page. I have to
Right.
swap back to. Okay, here we go. All right, I think that's shared to enough spots here.
Cool.
Whenever this page finishes loading, I'm gonna close out Facebook. And okay, I think we're good to go here. Introduce you here. Hello, Nevada County. This is David Clark Carroll with the Nevada County Tech Connection. We're a project of the Nevada County Economic Resource Council, and we're joined tonight by our good buddy Ethan Hunter. Ethan's been doing this great series of web development workshops, kind of looking at how to really get your website all buffed and polished up. Maybe you threw something together quick during quarantine to do some online sales, and you wanted to really figure out how to make it look good, have it be consistent, and you're ready to think about, okay, what if I want someone to do a little bit of maintenance on it now that I'm busy with my burgeoning business post shutdown? So Ethan's going to talk about style guides tonight. So all that information is documented, and you know what you did. So without much further ado, here we go. Ethan Hunter. Thanks again, Ethan.
Great, thanks, David. Yep, Ethan Hunter here. I do web design. I work in WordPress. If you've been following us the last, I guess, few weeks now, or months now, excuse me, we've talked about typeface or topography fonts. We've talked about color choices and selection. And we've talked about typeface color, images. Sorry, I didn't remember. In design, in web design. So there's a few more things that we're going to talk about too. We're going to throw in real quick, but like tonight, basically what we're talking about is style guides. So let's go ahead and just start screen sharing here and get right into it. So, all right, looks like we're sharing. Great. So, I can move this here and get my notes better. All right. All right. So we're going to tie everything together that we talked about, right? So, we're going to do it in what we call a style guide. And so basically that means coming up with a plan, like actually, all right, we got our images, we got everything, we kind of know what we want, or we have an idea anyways, or, we kind of have some starting point, as David mentioned, where, we started with the site and maybe we fine tuned it now, but we're going to really define things at this point. So that's what we call a style guide. And you can see I've got a couple up here just to kind of give you an overall idea of what a style guide looks like. All right, so what is a style guide? Well, a style guide is a reference source where you collect and present all of the design decisions for your website. So this is going to include your color scheme, topography we talked about, spacing, icons, imagery, buttons, all those little details, even font selection. We talked about that. Okay. So all those things, that's where we put it all together, and it's a reference source of sorts. It's a guide, right? So kind of self-explanatory. So why, right? So David brought up a really good point. Why? Well, because we need to tell somebody else what we think. We need to tell somebody else how we want it. We need to tell somebody else what we don't want them to do. We're giving them a kind of a blueprint, if you will, moving forward. So and why is it good? Well, when you're working on a team, so, maybe you are hiring a developer, or maybe, your business partner is taking it over. Maybe you're delegating it to another employee, whatever that is. If, and not only that, not only are you working with other people, but, it's going to help you kind of get a cohesive look, a certain kind of aesthetic that is going to define you. So it's going to help bring it all together so it doesn't look all patchwork and weird, or at least maybe you don't see it, but you kind of feel it. It's going to give your site definition, and it's going to give you kind of a future blueprint in the future. Like, I'm going to add a page, or I'm going to, add this service. I'm going to do this extra thing. I'm going to do maybe even branching out into Facebook or social media where you're marketing. You already have these kind of this look and this feel that is you. So, in some ways, not only is it a style guide, but, you're taking your brand. It's almost like in some aspects, it's a brand guide, but we're using it in the context of a website at this point. And what else is great about creating a style guide is that it's a shareable download, especially if you put it in that form, into a document, into even an image, like you can see here on the Let's Get Styling. Here it's very simple, one page. It says everything that the person really wants to say about how they want things guided. So it'll help. Maybe you have clients and they want to use some of your styling or whatever to promote you, or you have an affiliate link. Maybe you're reaching out to the press, not just social media. So, these are all really cool things to let people know, like, hey, this is the blueprint of who I am or what my site is moving forward. All right. So we can get this to go to the next one. All right. So we know what a style guide is, but let's jump back first, right? So maybe you didn't do this, or you have kind of done it, but maybe you could redo it a little bit. But let's go out and define everything again, right? Let's come up with our mission. Let's come up with our brand. Have a little thought bubble party. Get out there, draw different ideas. Maybe you already have your logo or your color scheme, but not quite sure about the font selection that you've chosen, or you haven't gone there yet. Start just thought mapping this whole thing and really define things, and maybe not get down to the nitty gritty of how I'm choosing my font or my images, but define who you are. Define what you look like. Here's an example. Like, there's actually kind of styles out there. If you noticed on websites, there's a topography or font-based site. There's a highly photographed, tons of photograph site. There are graphic sites that are using like vectors, or they're using 3D imagery, as one styling, or they're using illustration as a styling. Maybe they're minimalist. Maybe you're trying to purvey a minimalist idea. Maybe you have a brick and mortar business, you're a boutique, and you already have this kind of look and feel. And, you see that on a lot of like mommy me blogs or things like that. There's kind of a boutique-y feel. So, ask yourself, what do you look like? And ask yourself, give me 1 second to grab some water. Ask yourself who your audience is. Are you making this site for you so you can go look at it and go, I'm cool? Yeah, maybe, but who are you really trying to reach? Who's your target? Why is this site here? Who are you trying to bring in? What's your message? And this gets back to what your mission is. And we're doing all those things together, and kind of having that little thought process before you start your style guide will help you define, actually moving forward. So, all right, we've brainstormed it, we've mind mapped it. All right, so let's get to the guide. So this is, there's lots of guides out there. There's lots of different ways to like do it. So I found this one. I thought it was super awesome. Here we have, I don't know if you guys can see my little guy there, but anyway, so we have, primary buttons. They're showing the buttons, as well as they're also on the site, things you would click on and things like that. But they're also showing, this is my primary color. This is my secondary color. This is the light version of my primary. This is the dark version. This is what my home background. This is the color. You can see all these things. This is the dark background. This is the topography color. This is the text link. And also showing what those negatives are. So this is black on white. This is white on gray, white on black, white on green. These are what my logos are going to look like in a dark context, in a negative. This is what my heading is going to look like, bold, and maybe the second heading or the subtext. This is what my paragraph or bigger quote content. This is what my regular content paragraphs are going to look like. This is like my fine print. These are what the images are going to look like. These are icons, the drop down. So you can see, like, you can really like flesh this out any way you want. Obviously, there's things that I'm focusing on, and we're going to go into that next, because there's certain things that I think that matter. You can get as detailed as you want, or you can be not that detailed. So, for example, many platforms that we use are what we call content management systems, right? So you go on to a site like Shopify, Squarespace, Wix, WordPress. They're kind of running everything for you, and you're building something. Usually it's a builder, or they have a template, right? So a lot of times they'll have a place where you can go in and define all of those things, like define what my primary colors are, define what my font family is, define what my text and things that are like that are going to look like. And one thing that's cool about that usually is that when you choose something and say, hey, these are what my header text is all going to look like, that'll be applied globally. You've done it once. Every time you go in and create content or a new page or a new section in your site, that's going to be there for you. So that's one way to approach it. That's typically how I approach it, a little bit with like kind of my own map off to the side as I'm collecting all the images and different things. But I'll start a lot of times there, getting my color scheme right, getting my font choices right, and because that's a big part of it, of your website. You can also create a style guide, which this one's probably created on or something like that. If you use Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator, I use Inkscape and GIMP, which are, you know, the open source versions of that. So you can go in and, all right, this is my primary, and then, you know, bring in all the images, and, you know, bring all the different things into this kind of template that you make yourself. And there also is places out there, and there's a lot to mention, and it really depends on your use case. So I would Google that, but, you know, one is Canva. Canva is a great one. So you can go in there. They have a couple of these design guides, and you can kind of just plug and play in there, and it's a little bit easier for those who aren't that experienced or don't want to spend too much time, that there are those out there. A lot of times your content management systems, they come with themes and templates again. So sometimes you just go on there and go, I like this theme, you know, so it already has the color scheme, maybe it already has the font already picked out for you and all those different sides. It already has the way things are laid out and the imagery, and, you know, for the most part, and you just need to kind of stick with their thing. So that's also a great way. Like, hey, you know, I'm going to go out and buy a template, you know, Gardener's Delight template, and it's in green and light green and a gray and a black and a white, and, you know, it's all dialed in for you. So that's another way to think about making a design choice. It's kind of let somebody else do the design work, you know, like a template. And speaking of letting somebody else do the work, hire somebody. You know, if you can, and if you want to, you can actually hire somebody to make you a style guide. And there's even people that, you know, that's what they do for a living in marketing. They'll help you create a whole brand, you know, your logos, your icons, all of it. And, you know, they have a lot of experience. So, you know, you got to spend the money, but you're also paying for somebody who's done a lot of this before, has a lot of experience, and that might help you in the end. Again, talking about guides, you can make it really simple, like this one up here that I like, or you can make it really complex. I've seen them where they're literally like little notebooks, you know, so you can literally make a ton. So, you know, it's up to you. I like simple, and you can always add things as you feel like you need them. But that's my preference anyways. So, all right, so let's talk about logos, right? So that's, you know, when I'm talking about the basic things you really, I believe you should have in a style guide, the first is going to be a logo, right? Everybody on some level needs some sort of logo, some sort of branding. You know, obviously we have all different kinds of logos here. We've got logos that got, like, you know, a name. We've got, you know, Ford, it's like kind of a name or a letter and a symbol. Same with Shell. You know, you got Mac over here that's just apples, Pepsi, Kodak. You know, we're familiar with logos and branding, so I won't get too much detail in it, but you can see why we want a logo. We are familiar with half of these products over here, and it's partly because of the logo. Think about logos. Think about logos in different contexts. You know, is it written? Is it going to be written language? Is it a combination of written, you know, text and symbols or art? What does it look like in contrast? What does it look like black? What does it look like, you know, when it's a little, you know, I guess empty space? What does it look like behind a yellow or a brighter background black? What does it look like in a black background? And, you know, here we got a pretzel, right? So there's not even a letter or, you know, any type of words here. It's just a symbol or a, you know, piece of art. Even down to like backgrounds, they got a weird background here and how to use that logo. Another great one is, and here we'll just go to the next page on this one. You know, sometimes you can really just incorporate your text, and then we're doing something really cool here where, you know, you've got the and it's a little bit artistic, and it says E, or you know, or LE company, sorry, not and. And then she's using the E here, and, you know, also using it kind of in a logo or an artistic way, or the E again, or this is how I use the E here. And then over here, she's kind of listed do's and don'ts, like, this is how I want the LE company to be in a light background. This is how for using a darker color back, this is what I want. And here's the things I don't want. Don't do black on blue. Don't tweak the way that my logo goes. Don't, use weird black and blue combinations, kind of a little bit talking to people about what to do and what not to do. So in a logo, we really want to get your logo, figure out your color variations, figure out your sizing, what's it, how's it going to be, and another thing is like, I know we do this on Windows, drag something over and you're kind of dragging something to the side and it's not quite expanding right. So make sure that you're really specifying what your sizes are when they do get bigger and smaller so that things don't look weird or stretched out. And I know that seems like, well, maybe that's common sense, but define it anyways. Define your sizing, define your use cases, when you're allowed to use the logo, when you're not allowed to use the logo. Make sure that people understand that. Define the brand. Even, again, going back to what LEE companies, one of the simplest things she did was half of it's just in a font. It's just in words. So sometimes, you're going to make a symbol and some sort of art. Sometimes you're just going to use text. And make sure you kind of define that too in your logo a little bit. Come up with at least one visual that's in your typeface that you're going to be using. All right. Okay, so color. Obviously, color is huge. So we went from logos. Now, the second thing that I really think that matters is color. I think color is like probably one of the most important things because it's conveying so much without conveying anything. It's conveying emotion. It's tying a lot of different things together. Which we talked about before, don't make a rainbow of colors. Don't, really, maybe that is what you're doing. So that would be a very single use case. But a lot of times we're just using different colors. So we're, a blue, a gray. That's all the colors that these people have decided. And then now we have these little attention, like, hey, these are my accent colors. So these are maybe the highlights to a link or a call to action or a button like that. These are the colors we're using. And don't just say, well, I'm using blue, but say I'm using this color blue. And these are the different shades I'm using and define them. We start with a dark color here and we end up with a light color here, but they're defined. So there's always like, well, that looks like a light blue. Let's just kind of figure out where we find that. Like, no, actually give them the code. Give them the actual color you want them to use. It'll help, or it'll help you, if anything else. Again, you can see, I put it up here because I really like this example. They're just using kind of a clear background or whatever, a white, a black, and a green. And you can see, again, it's only two colors, really, that they're using. And then same over here, they're using kind of an orange or red, a black, a gray, and a green. And a lot of times that's what we're going to be using in color, right? We're always going to be using black and white or variations of even in the color. So, I like to say pick two colors, pick a primary color, pick a secondary color. Now, you can pick an accent color or you can make variations of that. So that's really important. A highlight color, maybe you're highlighting a link like we talked about, a call to action, maybe that's going to be a different color. Like, this example over here, where we have blues and grays, but really we also have kind of a bright pink and a green. So think about that too. Unfortunately, I guess I kind of blew it here, but, and I should have put it up there, but let's use in the other example here. No. We'll just go to this one. Gradients, and I don't know why I didn't do it, but anyways, if you guys don't know what a gradient is, you start with a blue, maybe say on one side and a purple on the other, and you see it a lot where it's blended. Instagram does that a lot, where it's like starts with purple and then it goes to like, I don't know, yellow or pink or something, I can't remember. But, a lot of people were doing that. We're using gradients in backgrounds. We're using gradients in buttons, but defining like, this is the color you can use from the beginning. This is the color you can use at the end. And even like a lot of gradients will have like, is it running up and down? Is it running left to right? Is it running at an angle? You decide that now where you want that. Also, again, talk about like I've chose black, but I'm also going to define the shades of that black. I chose gray. I'm also going to define, I chose red. I chose green. we're going to define those shades. Another one is, we're going to talk about this later, but in text or typeface, choose your font colors now, and think about your background coloring too and how that plays out. And we'll talk about that again when we visit fonts. But, think about all those things. How's the contrast? Me, I push accessibility a lot, so contrast matters to me. Like, how's it going to look for people who can't read very well, or maybe colorblind and see things a little bit differently than us? We want to make sure that they are having an easy time enjoying our content too. And of course, check at that point. You can also, that's where you would want to choose maybe, shades again for your body, your paragraphs, and shades, or different types for your headings and things like that. Think about those things now in your color scheme. Okay, topography. So topography, right? Like, the first thing is figure out your font families. And again, it's that same thing about color schemes. Get two, get a header, get a paragraph, and maybe a decorative. Maybe like that LE one that we just saw, LE Company, it was a nice handwritten thing. So that was a decorative one. Very, very not common use case. So maybe you're going to get a third font face in there, or font family, but, really stick to two, stick to a header, stick to a body, maybe an accent and decorative. And then the next thing is like, think about the spacing. How's everything going to play out? How's the header going to be spaced between the content and the paragraph? How are the paragraphs going to be spaced together? Not just spacing, this way, but how are they going to be spaced between each other? And how, the whole thing, or how is the content going to be spaced around all the content, your header, your paragraphs? Is there going to be a lot? Is it just going to go right to the edge? Or, so think about that now in your style guide. So spacing, height, width, line spacing. Think about your headers. So what, a lot of times when we're working in web design, we're using pixels. There are different other measurements, but come up with that now. Like, okay, my main header, my line catching header, my header 1 is going to be 56 pixels. You can see here 45. For the next one, maybe your subtext or your third header is going to be 35, and then jump over to your body text. Well, here again, these are the quotes, or maybe this is normal content, but this is maybe my shop, smaller fine print, and then this is like the real fine print, and defining those text sizes as well as spacing, height, width, all that really matters. Just defining, is my header going to be bold? Is going to be italicized? Is my header always going to be uppercase? If that's something you're going to do throughout the site. Now's the time to define that, especially because if you say, hey, all my header 1s are uppercase, and you pass that on to somebody and they don't know that, maybe they're smart enough, or they, intuitive enough to see what you've done in the design, but, put it out there, put it in your guide, put it in writing, literally. And then again, like I talked about earlier, make sure that your background choices and your font color choices also match up. So now is the time to really work all those things out. Okay, next one. All right, so images. So we've gone from logo, color, text, images, right? So that was like the 3 things that we really talked about besides the logo. So images is another huge, thing for our site. We've got color, text, and images. As far as I'm concerned, in white space, that's a website. So, these are really important things to put in your style guide, because when you are sharing this knowledge with other people or defining your own direction in your site, you want to make sure that this is included, because all these things matter. So the reason why I chose this one, it's pretty cool. So let's go to a bigger view of it. So one thing I like about this one, and I could have chosen a lot of different images out there, but so I pulled this one from a website that sells mock-ups. So me, I'm into making merchandise or things like that. So this is something you can put all your your name, your logo, or whatever you're selling on. What I really like about what they did here was that they took a bunch of different images. You know, this one's weird. It's got like a shadow, and this one's different. You know, this one's completely different. You know, the shots, the lights. But one thing that they did was they overlaid all the same. You notice it's all purple. It all has like kind of a purple blue tint to it. And the reason for that is, you know, it's time. We're talking about, again, bringing your images together. We're trying to make the site cohesive. So now's the time to focus in on that before you start putting things all over your site, and then it kind of looks really patchwork, and you know, and maybe that's what you're going for, but typically we're not. We're trying to find something that's a little more zen, you know. So so yeah, so in images, make sure that you are finding something that's cohesive. So define your image sizes. What's my product image size going to look like? Is it going to be 350 by 350? Is it going to be a thumbnail 150 pixels by 150 pixels? You know, what's my bigger images on my site's going to look like? What's my post images going to look like if you're somebody that blogs or does a lot of that? You know, what's my overlay, like this one, for example? What's that color? You know, and a lot of times, like, okay, so my site's purple. That's my primary, secondary color. Well, you know, an overlay with that's probably going to tie nicely together. So think about that. Define your do's and don'ts. I didn't grab it here, but like Audi, for example, you know, the car company, they say, I want pictures of people, but I want them to look determined and fierce. You know, they want, there has to be a certain way, just not like pictures of people driving cars. Like they're selling an attitude, an idea. So that may be something that you want to really think about in your images, right? Is, you know, what is that? Define what that kind of, that message in the imagery is. Define your do's and don'ts. Gather, get your images together. Maybe even get more than you're going to use. You know, get your mock-ups together. You know, figure out, like, if like for me, I, you know, do some merchandising. So, you know, figuring out where all those mock-ups are going to come together, and, you know, making that feel cohesive before I get going. Maybe I'm going to make new images later, but I know where I'm going to go get that, because I'm using a certain kind of look to you know, be cohesive on the whole site. So gather, list them, you know, put them together in different folders or whatever you have to do. You know, group them by content and context to that content. You know, is this landing page images? Is this social media images? Is this you know, my about me images? Is this my product images? Are these the ones that I use for posts? And then if you're, you know, maybe you're not doing images, so you're doing, you know, actual photography, but you're doing like vector images, or, you know, hand-drawn images, or 3D images or illustrations. That's imagery too. Grab that now, bring it all together, and kind of, you know, make sure it's all cohesive and sending that main message that, you know, we talked about, you know, with the mind map early on. What's your mission? What's your, you know, like I said, Audi's like, you know, they're really into a certain attitude that they want their people to look like. So think about that in images and bring those all together. Okay, so we're talking about images, but, you know, another form of imagery in a way. And I didn't really touch on this too much. I think maybe a little bit when I give the image talk, but it's icons. And I actually did, because I didn't remember that. So this is really important, like, right? So we, you know, these are probably more like mobile driven, but these are really like what we're used to seeing: a phone, a picture, a file, you know, send me email, you know, groups, Facebook, right? You know, Bluetooth, which, you know, probably not gonna put that on your site, but so think about all those things that you might be using. You know, maybe like for me, I sell, you know, services. So, you know, I use icons, you know, like, hey, I'm, you know, selling hosting. So I use gears, you know, to kind of like, you know, here's a machine or something like that. You know, another one's like, hey, you know, I design you something. So I show a laptop. So I'm using icons to kind of help with that messaging in providing my service. So that's the exact same thing. Is, are you going to do any of that? And think about that now, and bring all those things together. So bring in, and find something that works with your overall design that you kind of mind map to begin with, your overall look and feel. So choose those, icons. And, I know I listed resources, but like Bexy or somebody out there, they're great resources. A lot of times you can buy stuff, or, you pay a subscription and it's practically free. And you can get a whole boatload of icons that you can bring into your style guide and say, these are the icons that I'm using. And also be royalty free when you're using those types of sites. Again, so I don't know if you guys can see this very well. So some of these aren't that great examples, but so down here on the left, you can see like we've got different buttons. And so you can see like some are dark, some are light. So, really define like what are those buttons going to look like. These both are actually on this side, you'll see, well, these are badges, but sometimes buttons aren't square, they're rounded. So, figure out how that's going to look. Figure out how your contrasts are going to look. What's a button going to look like when it's normally, just on the site? What's a button going to look like when we call like, a hover state, or when you put the, the cursor over it and it changes color, or it does something graphically different, or when you click on it. Now's the time to also define all that. So go through and say, I want, my buttons to look like this. And when they're active, they look like this. And when they hover, they look like this. And they're not square, they're round. Or, they're when they're black, they're, this color of font, and so on and so forth. So gather your icons, define your buttons, define the size of them again, the color schemes, and this is where you can bring in gradients and things like that. Styling, hover state, active. Sometimes we'll have what we call a CTA, or a call to action, which is really popular in websites in general, because we want people to engage immediately. So we say, hey, I got this thing that's really awesome. Subtext below says this thing's super awesome. Click here to be awesome too. That's a call to action. So think about what that color looks like in your buttons, your icons. Yes. So, okay, so that was it, right? So we talked about logo, we talked about color, we talked about fonts or typefaces, we talked about images, we talked about buttons and icons. Okay, so here we go. So here's a really, really simple one. And I don't know how well this shows up on your guys' screen, but you can see this woman put together a pretty nice little example, right? So literally one page, put your logo here, put your logo here, list your color, your primary, your secondary, you list all these names, list all the different codes. This really helps, especially a designer or a developer who's not really necessarily a designer, but they just use your code and they do what they need to. They're listing their headlines or their headers. So listing their paragraphs. There's a spot here for images. What's the tagline? How's that look? What's the other graphical elements? What's the background images? So that's what she did here. So there's Penny's ice cream. This is how Penny looks this way. This is how Penny looks this way. These are all her color scheme. These are her font colors or choices and sizes. Some basic idea of imagery or labels, and even background colors. So that's one. And like I said, there's so many out there that I don't want to just be like, all right, go to this guy. You're going to have to create your own use case and maybe find different things that work for you, whether they're online or offline, or you create them yourself. All right, so here's another great one, and I like this one too. It's super simple, right? Like, here's my logos. This is how we display the different logos in a dark sense or in a light sense. With the logo, with typeface and logo. This is acceptable in the way that we have print. This is unacceptable in the way that we, would use print. These are our primary colors. This is the shade of the, lighter shade, a darker shade. Again, an accent color, a secondary, and a background. It doesn't get more. It's not complicated. And in fact, what's awesome about doing something like making sure you're kind of narrowing it down to a couple different things is it does take your choices away, but it also brings everything really visually together. So again, you've got, brand topography. So your header, again, we're going over the same things we went to before, but defining what that looks like. What does it look like in regular, bold, and black? What does it look like? What's the body? What's the special or accent font? These things matter when we're making those overall design choices. Okay, so final thoughts. So kind of blew through this. I guess we spent a little time on it. Remember, the more time you put into something, the chances are, not always, yeah, thank you, David. The chances are not always, they're going to be better, but most likely, right? You're really going to flesh out things and think about it. So, a lot of times you're like, I want to make a site, get on Wix, start throwing stuff in the boxes, putting stuff together willy-nilly. It looks good. Wix or those kind of places are built on helping somebody who doesn't know a lot design, flesh it out without making it look really archaic or, 1991, Yahoo website or something. But, take that time to really think about what you're doing before you actually jump into that first design, or maybe step back from the design that you've already created and say, what, how could, get the thought bubble out, go through your list of logos and images and color schemes and palettes and things like that, and really flesh that out, and then come to your site fresh if you've already made a site. Realize that the more you do this, the easier it is on you later on, the better impact you have on the person, your audience you're trying to reach, the message you're trying to send, the use of the user ease, just it's not chaotic. It doesn't feel patchwork. We kind of been taught over time, like, if everything just seems visually flowing, we flow from one to the next and it feels good. And, I've gone to sites where that, like, this person's got a great product, but their site looks like they made it in WYSIWYG Netscape 20 years ago, and they have no credibility. And I dig them, and I think that their product's great, and I know that they're selling a ton of product. But for me as a consumer, and something that I do, and a lot of us do, because we're on websites now, is maybe I already knew that person was an awesome product, but had I gone to their site and not known that, I probably would have given them a pass. I would have wondered if they actually knew, like, was I going to get scammed? I hate to say it, but that's, something we do feel like, we go read all these reviews and make sure that this person's legitimate before we, give them our $10 for a t-shirt. But, having credibility is important, also in that aspect. So that's a style guide in a nutshell. There's a lot of different ones out there. I would say just go ahead and start Googling. You'll go down the rabbit hole. It'll be awesome. There's even more stuff that I haven't touched on. There's a lot of people talking about it, because it is a big part of not just website building and design and development, but it's also a part of marketing and branding in general. So think about your style and style it right, and let it guide you in how you make your choices moving forward. And that's me. That's what I got.
That was awesome tonight, man. A lot of covered a lot of ground, a lot of useful ideas. I mean, just from my side, it's so key to think about the color from the beginning, because probably like some folks out there, I made a website, I didn't pay attention to what exact color I chose, and a year later or so, I'm trying to make stickers, trying to make logos, and having to go back and figure everything out. Be like, what program did I do that in? Where's the parent file with the actual hue of that green? And you wind up just driving yourself crazy. Whereas if you think about it from the beginning, you're good to go.
Yes, and but I mean, do you remember, like, I showed you that, guys? There's like really that cool color picker tool.
Yeah.
So you can use that. because that saved my butt a million times. Or I'll go to a site and be like, wow, I really like that color, and I can pull it out. Or I've even used that on images. So, I mean, that is a workaround, but you're absolutely right. You do need to, especially like you could go in a lot more detail on these style guides, but, really focusing in on your color, focusing in on your fonts, focusing in on your images, obviously, because we talked about those at great detail already. The icons, the buttons, any of those illustrations, it really matters. And it does save you a lot of headaches later on, but it makes everything so much easier too, because even though it seems like, oh God, this is like a little extra step, moving forward, you don't have to ask those questions anymore, or you don't have to sit there on Zoom and have a talk about what you think things should be with your developer designer, because you already figured it out. And you go, here it is, And to me, I think it's just you need to come up with the idea before you actually put it in in actual physical form or digital form.
Absolutely. One other thought I had while we were talking is so much of this stuff, particularly like the last year and a half, I think a lot of people came up with this by themselves, maybe during downtimes. Show someone else before you like lock all of this stuff in stone. Make sure other people can read your font. Make sure, whatever image you're choosing that looks great to you, they get the same message out of it. Because you always want to keep that in mind of what is my intended audience going to get out of this, and it could be something different than what you think they're going to. So just show a friend, hop on a forum, pick people's brains.
Yes, I think absolutely getting that second perspective, because I tell a lot of dad jokes. Nobody gets them but me. And so I think it's really important that if I'm gonna have a website about dad jokes, I need other people to understand my dad joke. So yes, you're absolutely right. Having some sort of outer input, and that's a great place with a style guide, before you start going and doing all these crazy things on your website, that you can have a conversation with your business partner, your employees, a customer. Hey, what do you think of this? Like, oh, that looks horrible. I would never buy anything from that. That's good to know before you get there.
Absolutely. I think that was about all the things. Oh, one more thought I had about the call to action buttons. That's something that we saw a lot of in the last year, of people, you go to a website, they want to catch your attention right off the bat.
Absolutely.
So, but at the same time, you really don't want that to be a complete clash with your existing design and color palette and style. So, it's walking that fine line. How do you grab people's attention, but still have it be cohesive? So it's a challenge I don't necessarily have an answer for, but it's one of those things that I think is very timely. So glad you brought it up and addressed it.
I think you just play around with it.
Yeah.
I mean, you have an idea, what works and what doesn't, and then you figure out what your audience wants. But yeah, I think that you figure out what works and what doesn't work. But yes, call to action is extremely important.
Well, this was just awesome, Ethan. This is unfortunately the last in the series presented by Ethan for now. Hopefully, we'll get him back to share some of his knowledge further down the road. All these videos are going to be under a playlist on our YouTube channel. They're all out there on Facebook. So if you're wondering, oh, he's talking about images, another one, we've got a lot more details out there for you.
Right.
So thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you got something really useful out of this. Want to thank Ethan Hunter again for really stepping up and really bringing back the web development in some form. So we really appreciate it, Ethan.
Thanks.
I'm David Clark. I'm David Clark Carroll from the Nevada County Tech Connection. Thanks so much.
Bye, guys.